All right, hey folks, we are now on part 2 of the Q&A for November. So let's get into this. So first question is one by Gravity Training, and it's, what's the best life advice you could give to a 21-year-old? So I thought about this question a lot over the weekend, and I thought, what advice would I have wanted someone to give me when I was your age? So that's the way I approached this question. And I actually wrote down 3 broad titles. 1, money, 2, work, and 3, mentors, basically education. And I wrote down a couple of other subcategories which I don't want to comment on because I think they are probably too individual to really discuss. So we'll talk about them at the end. Firstly, money. I wish somebody had sort of sat me down when I was about your age and just told me to start putting a little bit of money away and learn about things like compounding interest, learning about savings accounts, just learn about money and how it works, and like what your, I wish somebody had basically said, look, Faz, just, put aside 50 quid a month, just somewhere, put it into some savings, put it into some, like, whatever it is. Like, obviously this is not financial advice, so I'm not going to talk about specifics, but start to learn about various ways to save money, various ways that you can save money, things that you can, put your money into, which can then compound over the years and result in you having quite a lot of money when you're, later in life. So first thing is, I just wish somebody had said, take, I don't know, whatever, 5%, 10% of your earnings, whatever it is, and just put it aside somewhere, which is going to be difficult when you're younger, right? Because you don't have much spare money, and what you do have, there's lots of other things to spend it on. But trust me, you're not going to miss it, right? Just direct debit it out of your account into a different place and then just do something with it. Don't let it just sit in your bank either. Do something with it, and just learn about your various options. If you want to discuss that more with me, just DM me privately and I can just tell you what I do. But I don't want to talk about that publicly because it's it's not really the appropriate thing to do. But firstly, just put some money away. Secondly, work. I'm a firm believer that in your 20s you should learn your craft. Like, whatever you're doing, I think you're at university. I think so. If you're not, whatever you're doing, whether you're learning a craft or whatever, learn your craft. Be involved in something which you're passionate about and you can do. So like me, for example, I had a computer science degree and I did use that in my previous career for all of my career. So it was useful. Now, there are other people. I know one of my best friends, she had a zoology degree and she learned about various things to do with, like, I don't know, it's something to do with conservation. I don't really know what she does, but something to do with conservation. And she learned about it all through her 20s, learned her craft while working for somebody else. And in her 30s, she basically kickstarted for her own business. And I think that's a good way to go. So in your 20s, learn your craft, gain lots of experience, try and gain it from companies and people where you're actually going to get something tangible from them. So actually some real experience in your job and experience in learning your craft. And if you're really lucky, maybe even getting some contacts, which are going to help you later on in life, building relationships, stuff like that. Try and network a little bit. Know your craft. And then in your 30s, either look to go into business for yourself, depending on what your craft is, or try and leverage yourself into a position where you're a little bit higher up and work your way up the ladder. That's kind of roughly what I would do. In your 20s right now, don't have these big dreams about I'm going to take over and all that kind of stuff, right? Just learn your craft. Make sure you get very, very good at your craft. So then the sky's the limit. You don't want to be sort of amazing in your hometown, just broaden your horizon. Make sure you're very, very good at what you do. Learn. And the final thing is mentors. Like, one thing which I was very lucky with this when I was younger. I've had a lot of mentors over the years. When I was young, my father passed away. My father passed away when I was 15. And I had a lot of, I kind of latched onto a lot of positive male role models who were influences in my life, which taught me whatever. In fact, Steve Shaw from Massive Iron was one of them many years ago. So him and I first sort of got in touch with each other probably 17, 18 years ago now. And he was a major influence on my life back then, as he is now. And it's nice to have people like that in your life who you can learn from, because they are 15, 16, 17, 20 years ahead of you. And, they might not have everything worked out either, right? But they've been through what you've been through, and they've at least can talk from experience about potentially what they would do differently then. And all the mentors I ever had, I mean, I remember one of my first mentors was a guy called Dave Morris, who was off the Hard Gainer forums. I don't really like the Hard Gainer forums now, but he was at least a very, very sensible guy. Me and him used to talk a lot. And he was a positive role model for me in terms of what I was doing. And he just rubbed off on me in terms of like how I spoke to people. And you can learn something from everyone, you know. And yeah, it's just wise to have those kind of influences in your life. The last two things I was going to talk about, which I don't think are actually, I can really give advice on, is relationships and friendships. I think a lot of people try and give you advice about relationships, but I think that it's so varied. You know, some people get married really early. Some people get married a lot later. Some people never get married. Friendships are very different as well. So I just think that whole area is a little bit too varied, but hopefully you can at least pick something up from what I've said with regards to money, work, and mentors. So hopefully that was useful. Right, so let's carry on talking through these questions. Next one is from Paul Velasquez. Paul says, I have a weak overhand pull-up, 5 rep max, and I haven't progressed in quite a while. Other lifts have done very well, like the deadlift, barbell row, squats, and so on. I don't weigh very much, 170 at 5'7". What exercises can I do to get stronger at this, or shall I just do this exercise more often? No, you shouldn't do this exercise more often. He says, right now I'm at about 3 to 5 sets a week. You shouldn't do the exact same thing more often, but you should do more work, but more varied. So just doing, I mean, 3 to 5 sets is not very much, Paul. You know, you should be, for your upper back, you should be doing at least the requisite, you know, 10 to 20 sets, right? I think most people would agree on that. Now, in terms of pull-ups, I think you've got to vary things a lot more. So I quite like for pull-ups, I like doing single repetitions, which are quite good. Well, at least low repetitions, singles, doubles, triples, as well as a lot of high repetition work. So I don't know, 6x6, 3x10, 3x12. And to do that, you might need to have assisted work, like either a band or an assisted machine, and then just your bread and butter 3x5 on top of that. So vary things a lot more. You might be training the chins, you know, 2-3 times a week, but vary things more. You don't want to just hammer the same thing over and over again. And at the same time, you don't just want to be doing such a low volume of work altogether. So, and you're very welcome, Paul. Thanks for the great tips. You're very welcome. All right. Next one is from Coach Matt Wolf. If a beginner, this is a long question. If a beginner is pressed for time with the goal of hypertrophy, is it acceptable to try and not do straight sets in favor of rest pause style or density training? Basically, the idea of spending 2-3 minutes for rest on 3x10 adds up to a lot of time for 3 days a week, full body. Coach Matt Wolf, why are you getting your beginners to rest 3 minutes? Firstly, let's answer that a little bit. Why are you getting your beginners to rest 3 minutes per sets? They're beginners. And why are you getting them to rest 2 or 3 minutes? Answer that question first. Like, is that because science tells us that? Come on, Coach Matt Wolf, you should know better than this. You're a coach. They don't need to, they're beginners. They don't need to be resting 2 or 3 minutes between sets. One of the first things you should be doing with your beginners is you should be building up their work capacity. They need to be doing more work. So yeah, I think that you talk about quite a lot of solutions to this, like various complicated density schemes. Just shorten the rest periods, dude. It's really quite simple. If they don't have time to do a lot of work during the week, shorten their rest periods. They don't need to be sitting around. Come on, a beginner lifting, what's a beginner squatting these days? 60 kilos? And you're getting them to rest 3 minutes between sets? Come on now. You know better than that. You're a coach. So I'm being funny. But basically, you know, you've got to apply more density by reducing the rest periods. You don't need to have a beginner who's handling hardly any weights rest 3 minutes between sets. It's just not something you need to do. Also, as a side note, is it possible to see the beginner program and you are working on or starting using it to work out now? Yeah, no, that will be out soon. I need to figure out some stuff about the beginner program that I'm in terms of it's the problem with putting out a program for everyone is, especially something like a beginner program, is that because it's going to be available for everyone, you've got to try and provide enough caveats that it is actually useful for everyone too. So I'm still in the process of writing it, and it's a little bit more complicated than it would be easier if I was just working with somebody one-to-one. But this is supposed to be something which is quite generic, but I don't want it to be rubbish either. So it's going to take a bit of time to put together. But anyway, Coach Matt Wolf, hopefully that was useful. I'll speak to you soon. Right. Ezra says, any advice on having patience while recovering from an injury? I'm a novice who's only been lifting seriously for a couple of months now. Okay. I was making great progress in adding weight to the bar every week, and I was really happy with my results. About 3 to 4 weeks ago, I started getting really bad exertion headaches from not breathing and bracing properly. I'm trying to ease back into exercise, but it's really hard to be patient. Okay. Ezra, I'm not sure what the injury is then. You said exertion headaches. That's, I suppose we could class that as an injury. Have you gotten the all clear from your doctor to make sure there's nothing else going on? I mean, you know, I hope there's not, but it would be worth checking in with the doctor just to say, am I good to carry on lifting, or at least what was the cause? I mean, if the cause was breathing and bracing properly, then if you fix that, you shouldn't be getting the headaches anymore. But if that's not the problem, then maybe go to your doctor and say, well, what's going on? I mean, this is not really an injury per se. It's like it's more incorrect form. So, Ezra, with that, are you still having pain? Like, are you still getting headaches? If you are still getting headaches, then have you fixed the breathing? And if you have, then, well, that's not what's causing it then. It must be something else. So this is not quite clear cut. I think this is one of those where I think you need to see your GP, a specialist, because the question isn't that clear. So, yeah, I think with regards to breathing and bracing properly, perhaps we can discuss that a little bit. I know that Chris Duffin has some very good videos, some old videos now on breathing and bracing properly. It's worth looking into his, I think he explains it very well in a half-an-hour video with Mark Bell and Silent Mike. So look for that online on YouTube. It's a very, very good video. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a confusing question, Ezra, because what you're describing is not an injury. It's just poor form. And if you fix the poor form, you shouldn't be having that anymore. So let me know what's going on there. All right, Supermon Call Klamopatana says, which intensity techniques do you think are the best for hypertrophy? Actually, you know what? I'm not a massive fan of intensity techniques. I'm just not. I'm not a huge fan of intensity techniques because a lot of it is just, I think, well, there's two reasons. Firstly, most people don't work hard enough on the first set they're doing. So getting them to do supersets and drop sets and all that kind of stuff, it just ruins their concentration. So one poor set ends up being 2 or 3 poor sets. So I'm not really such a big fan of doing that. What I do think is quite useful, though, is condensing your workload. So just do more straight sets, but just do them with less rest period. I know everything in science says 2 or 3 minutes rest period, but it's a trainable factor. You can get fitter. Your work capacity can improve. You know, I mean, if you want to strictly go by the science, it's 2 or 3 minutes, but I just have seen plenty of my guys, my clients, do far better by increasing their workout density and increasing the amount of work they do within a session, rather than have to stick religiously to this 2 or 3 minute arbitrary rule. So I think the best technique is just to increase your work capacity by shortening your rest periods gradually, gradually packing in more work, get the work done, right? You do more work by doing more work. All right. Shakin says, would you recommend training arms for a beginner? Generally, it depends how much of a beginner you're talking about. So for a rank beginner, so a guy who's never, or a girl who's never stepped foot in a gym before ever, I probably wouldn't, because in my experience, for rank beginners, they don't have the workout endurance to do a full body session without it being quite taxing anyway. So if I add arms on top of that, they're just going to throw up, and it's going to be horrendous. So I mean, I remember a few years back, I trained this beginner actually one-on-one. I've done a bit of one-on-one training as well, and I mean, he was, after a session, he was regularly throwing up. And he was fine, nothing wrong with him, but just doing a full body workout and getting stronger and progressing week in, week out, session in, session out, it was a lot for him to handle. So if the beginner can add in arm work, well, they're probably going to do it anyway. They'll probably do it when your back's turned. So I wouldn't purposely add it in, just because they've probably, if they are a rank beginner, they've probably got their hands full anyway. Now, if you're talking about a guy who's maybe 3 months into the gym, their endurance is a bit better, and they can fit it in after a full body workout, then yeah, I think it's fine. You can add in some arm work, but it's not that necessary as long as they're doing a proper full body routine, especially right from the beginning. They're going to have their hands full. All right. Vultures says, Are there much difference between pendulum squats and hack squats? For example, the part of the quad it hits. Why are pendulums much harder to load? Pendulums are great, you know. I think probably the difference is that pendulums are very hard to cheat, whereas hack squats are very easy to cheat. So I see some guys, when they do hack squats, they have their feet right at the top of the platform. And it makes the hack squat really very much a, you know, like a more glute specific kind of movement. Whereas pendulum squats, they usually have very small platforms. So it's quite hard to cheat a pendulum squat. So I think that's probably the answer is it's harder to cheat a pendulum squat. So that's probably why they're harder to load, because you might just be adding too much weight for the hack squat. Your feet might be like really high and wide on the platform. So you're able to really spread the load out, and it's not actually targeting the quads quite as much as you think it is. Maybe that's the reason why. There shouldn't really be any other reason. I mean, I've done 5 plates on the pendulum before, depending on the build. You know, that's a pretty decent amount of weight. So I think it's just a case of they just force you to work harder, more strictly. But I guess I'd have to see the machine to give you a better answer. Okay, Lee Harris says fasting as a tool for health and longevity. Yeah, it's very useful. It's very useful. I think as I get older, I mean, I've done some form of fasting for the last 10 years, 11, 12 years. I first experimented with fasting when I was 29, 30 years old. And I really enjoyed it. Very quickly, I went from what we call nowadays, we call time restricted eating, which is like a, you know, the 16/8 type of thing. Nowadays, in the research, that's not really called fasting. That's called more time restricted eating. But I very quickly went from time restricted eating to actual full day fasting. So 24-hour fast, 48-hour fast, things like that. And I loved it. I thought it was very good. It has a number of really good positive benefits. So for me, it seems to make dieting a lot easier. Like, it really moderates my appetite. If I do 1 or 2 fasts per week, my appetite just stays nice and trim, in good shape. It makes life easier. I think one of the misconceptions about fasting is that it's hard and it makes your life harder. Actually, it makes your life easier because dieting becomes easier. So it's worth bearing that in mind. For longevity and health, I think if it works for anything, it's probably 2 mechanisms. The first one is it's an easy way to reduce calories. And we know that less calories, turning off mTOR, is generally good for health and longevity. The other thing is, in studies that they've done, which have compared fasting to non-fasting with the same level of calories and the same weight loss, generally the fasting groups tend to have better results in blood pressure. Also, weirdly enough, higher LDL, which is not good, but certainly better results in blood pressure. So something to acutely lower blood pressure would be fasting. So there is that. But above and beyond that, there's not that much. It's, again, it boils down to calories in versus calories out. You know, does it allow you to maintain your body weight easily? Does it suit you? I'll just say, from a sort of anecdotal point of view, a lot of older guys that I know really get on well with fasting. There are not many guys who are like 40s and 50s who are interested in, you know, fitness, who don't fast to some degree. Also, bear in mind, are in good shape as well. There's not many 40, 50-year-old guys I know who are in good shape, you know, who don't do some form of fasting. Just anecdotally, you know, don't shoot the messenger. Just what I've seen from guys around me. It seems to be something that you gravitate to when you're older for whatever reason. I mean, there was that study recently that was posted, I think Mena Hensman posted it, about ketogenic diets being more favorable for people who are older because they tend to not process carbs quite as well. So there is some kind of difference there, you know, because obviously if you're fasting, you're going into starvation ketosis. So that may be something that people experiment with and have benefits to. So yeah, I think you have to be very careful with saying fasting is just blanket better. It's better probably because of the calories in versus calories out equation, if it lets you, you know, keep your calories at a decent level. But there may be some acute benefits, for people who are older or for people with high blood pressure problems, whatever. But there are also the downsides because ketogenic diets and fasting basically does cause you to go into ketosis, does play a number on your cholesterol and your numbers. So depends, you know, what you think of in that regard, how important that is as a factor for health. Okay, next question. This one's from David Wang. He says, what's your opinion on how you should approach RIR, reps and sets, for imbalanced muscle groups? For example, if I was doing Bulgarian split squats with X amount of kilos and my max reps for my left leg is 20, but for my right it's 22, do I just keep going to each leg's RIR and then just let the imbalances gradually even out? Okay, I think it's a good question. Now, here's what I would say. So if you are very interested in sorting out your imbalances, like it sounds like you are, then I wouldn't even do the stronger leg. Easy solution. Okay, so let's say your leg routine is, let's say your let's say your quads have an imbalance, okay? And your quad routine is squats, 3 sets of leg press, 3 sets of leg extensions, so there's 9 sets there. And then on top of that, you do 3 sets of split squats and 3 sets of single leg press, okay? I would do your squats, leg press, and leg extension, 3 sets each. Great, no problem. For the split squats and the single leg press, I would just do your weaker leg. Easy, nice and easy. You've got an easy solution there. Don't even if you're actively trying to figure out that imbalance, I wouldn't even bother. Just train those. Train your entire leg structure up to the point where you've got a reasonable amount of volume where you're probably going to progress. 9 is about right. And then if you are very interested in sorting out an imbalance, tag on the work on top of that with unilateral work, but just don't do the stronger side. I just wouldn't bother. That's sort of that's the solution if you're very, very interested in sorting out the imbalance. Now, if you're not interested in sorting out the imbalance and you just want to do unilateral work to prevent an imbalance or to prevent a further imbalance, then yeah, just take them both up to their appropriate RIR, because then it doesn't matter. You're at least getting some single leg work in and one muscle group, one side from taking over with when you're doing double arm movements or double leg movements. So that's what I would do. So 2 different scenarios. Really depends on how interested you are in sorting out the imbalance or not. All right, David, hopefully that was useful. All right, this is from Rico Santana. He says, accessory lifts should be done for more higher reps instead of trying to move as much weight as possible on them. Rico, you're asking 2 things. It's quite a loaded question. You should be looking to move as much weight on every exercise. So whether I think this is a very misunderstood topic, because lifting heavy versus higher rep range, they're not mutually exclusive. Like, if you are working your accessory exercises, let's say machine rows, okay? You're working them for sets of 12. You need to be going as heavy as you can for sets of 12. So it's both. Like, it's both. You've got to be working as heavy as you can for the repetition range that you're working in. We need to get away from this whole concept of we're either working heavy or we're doing accessories and doing higher reps. You need to be going heavy for higher reps. Okay. So the question in and of itself, it betrays a misunderstanding of what you should be doing with your accessories. Yes, you should be doing higher reps, probably. And yes, you should be pounding the weights and trying to lift as much as possible. You should be doing both. So, right. Hermie Munster says, bulking, cutting, how closely should you track macros, or is it sufficient to just track calories and protein? What's an effective way to establish? Okay, there's a few questions here, so let's target the first question. Bulking, cutting, how closely should you be tracking macros, or is it sufficient to track calories and protein? Okay, now, it might surprise you to know, but generally when I bulk and cut, and for most of my clients, I don't actually use a calorie approach anymore. So I don't target calories, protein, or whatever, okay? What I do is I go via body weight and performance, simply because that tells me what I need to know. Now, if you are on a diet and your body weight is going down and your strength is at least maintaining, we're on the right track. So what you're interested in really is your body weight reducing and your muscle mass staying high. So you can be sure it's your body fat going down. You don't necessarily need to know your exact macros and calories. Now, I might put a new client on a macro and calorie approach just to see where they're at. Because let's say I get somebody to track for the first couple of weeks that they're with me as a client, and they turn up with 100 grams of protein and like 400 grams of carbs and like 80 grams of fat. And I'm like, where's your protein, bro? It highlights a problem. But long term, it's not something that I want to be doing. I will say, having worked sort of in the industry for a few years now, I know roughly 3 people who have managed to maintain a macro calorie approach for those 5 years. I mean, and I've lifted weights myself for over 20 years, and it's probably those same 3 people that I know who've actually managed to maintain a 5-year streak on MyFitnessPal. Everyone else dips in and out of it. So what are we teaching ourselves? We're teaching ourselves that when we're on a diet, when we're focused, we're tracking. When we're unfocused, we have no contingency because we don't even know what we're doing. There's no practice there. So I don't have people tracking, really. Yeah, I don't have people tracking. It's just the way it is. I think I have a system of eating, which is what I use for myself and my clients, and they all love that system of eating. They all get along with it. They all get plenty of protein in, plenty of vegetables, all that kind of stuff. They eat for how we eat for health predominantly, and then we use the proxy of body weight and performance to track where we're going, and also pictures, measurements, stuff like that. So for the first question, it's a no. Second question from the same guy is, what's an effective way to establish what your maintenance calories are? I mean, again, if you were doing a calorie approach, it was quite simple. Just eat and track for a couple of weeks, and then there you go. You track your body weight, track your calories, see what's happening. If your body weight stayed the same, that means that's your maintenance. If your body weight went up, then your maintenance is probably a little bit lower. If your body weight went down, then your maintenance is probably a little bit higher. It's quite simple, really. I wouldn't use calculators. I think calculators are the bane of, fitness. It's one of the many problems that confuse the average person getting into fitness. Is these calorie calculators are just terrible, absolutely awful. Everyone's minutely different. Everyone has different ways of tracking. Everyone screws up tracking. So calorie calculators are the most ridiculous things. The amount of times I've heard people say, you know what, I've been eating maintenance for 4 weeks and I've not lost any weight. It's like, well, you've not been eating that. I've been eating at deficit for 4 weeks. I've not lost any weight. Well, you've not been eating at a deficit then. You've been eating at maintenance. So I think calorie calculators are absolute rubbish. Use that method. Track your food for a couple of weeks. Track your body weight for the same couple of weeks, and then work it out from there. That's the best way to do it. And the final question from Hermie Monster is, on the Wizard program on light day, should you use a double progression for loading? Yes, you should. Yes. I don't necessarily do that much RIR. I think you should just try and progress. I wouldn't worry too much about going to failure on a light day because it's not that stressful anyway. Just worry more about progression. Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions. Lee Harris says, overcoming the temptation to go to the gym and train on rest days. And it was a reply from Ezra who linked him to a video by Steve Shaw talking about arms on rest days and how you shouldn't have enough energy to do that. Love Steve, of course, and I agree with him on many things. Lee, I would just say this: if you can fit in more work and you can do it while you are still gaining, then, well, maybe your routine needs changing. Maybe you can do more work. Maybe add in some cardio as well. Perhaps do something else on your days which is going to be productive. I don't necessarily think you should just sit on your hands at home. Like, if you genuinely have the impetus to go to the gym and do something, I think you could probably broaden your horizons out. I mean, I don't know how many days a week you train. If you only train 2 days a week, for example, you could up that to 4 quite easily. But if you're already training 4 days a week, upping that to 6 is, well, for a natural, you might be running into problems at that stage. So I would suggest, maybe look at broadening your horizons in terms of what you can do. Like, potentially look at starting a cardio program, something which where you can see successes across a wider range of criteria. Like, I'm doing jogging 1 day a week. I'm doing my weight training 4 days a week, and that's a nice schedule. I'll probably add in an additional day of cardio on the 6th day as well, just so I still have 1 day of rest. Now, it doesn't really make sense for me to hit the gym 6 days a week. For a guy who's natural, hitting the gym 6 days a week, you're going to run into either recovery problems, like joint ligament issues, all that kind of stuff. Like, I've been there, and it's not really that great. So it pays more to broaden your horizons rather than just go to the gym for the sake of going to the gym. But I would say I think it's a good idea to have a higher degree of activity if you have got the mindset to do so. Like, if you are able to go to the gym more often and you've got the energy to go to the gym more often, then do something more often. It doesn't necessarily have to be the weights though. So that's kind of where I would throw some caution at the wind. And so, okay, you know what? Let's maybe try and broaden our horizons, do something else. Let's pick up a skill. Go grab a friend and play some tennis. Go jogging, do some cardio, you know, work your heart. I mean, you know, it's you can amass different wins. It doesn't always have to be weights, because that can form a very narrow-minded focus. And like anything, it leads to overuse injuries. You know, broaden your horizons out a little bit. Right, we are going to call it there. So I will get this one uploaded today, and I will speak to you guys soon. By the way, guys, if you listen to this and you're asking about timestamps, help me out. Help me out. Write down some timestamps, and that will help me out. Post them in the comments, and I'll post them up. All right, cheers.